Hey, Ben, jump on board. The water's fun. Just looking up an email here. Do you have that thing where things are easy to find on your computer in Gmail, but on your phone, not so much? It's weird. I mean, Google does an okay job. All right, must be in that other email box. So what I'm trying to do actually, Ben, is log into this from, dang it, that's gonna be a problem. I may have to look at it in a second. I was trying to log into the meeting as myself through my phone because in teaching school, I've been trying to do that. It's hard because I want to use my phone as a document camera. Have you done that at all? Hi, remind me, is it Shuan?
Yeah, it's Shuan, like
Shuan.
Shuan sock without the sock.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my air conditioning off so I can hear you guys. Oh good, Eva's here too, yay. Awesome, everybody's popping on. Yay, Deidre. Oh, I have to switch this so I can see all of you at the same time. So just to double check here, everybody, do you know how to find the participants window? I wonder why I'm echoey. Okay. Sandra too, yay, hello everybody. I know it's no, it's not really late across the pond. It's actually just like 5 or something, 6?
6 here.
Okay, all right, good deal, okay. So I want to get started pretty quickly because here in the embodiment circles, we like to honor your time, and it is exactly time to start. So I would love for you all to go around and introduce yourself. I think many of you know one another through the embodiment circles, and I know that Benjamin hasn't yet joined a circle, so it'd be really great for everybody to just get to that basic introduction level. If you could just tell us who you are, you know, in a 1-minute elevator pitch. And you're at liberty to unmute yourself and just jump in. You don't have to raise your hand or anything.
Okay, I'll go first.
Cool.
I'm Benjamin Garza. I live in Round Rock, Texas. I'm a licensed specialist in school psychology, yoga teacher, Sama trainer, jack of all trades. I do everything but teach in a school. Teach kids. Let's see. I'm currently in a 2-week quarantine with my own kids. So that's the bunk bed behind me that I'm sleeping on top of. Why we put the 45-year-old guy on top, I'm not sure. But there have been accidents since we started. As far as embodiment circles go, I've got some experience embodiment circle or in circle support groups and psychoeducational groups.
Thank you for being here. Fits right in.
I'm happy to go. I'm Shuan Menez, not my real name. I come from Wales and I'm doing one of the embodiment circles on a Sunday in Welsh. And Carrie and I have spoken before because I have 3 teenagers in quarantine with me at the moment. And it's not easy for them, and it's definitely not easy for me either. And I work as a civil servant in the housing sector for the Welsh Government and do some coaching as well on the side.
Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate your input.
I'm Eva from somewhere near Stuttgart, Germany. And I'm, well, I can't really say how to introduce myself because I do so many different things. I'm a coach. I also work as a therapist in the trauma field. I work with kids, teach kids courses. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher. And besides all of that, I'm also a researcher at university in engineering. And I spent a year in Cardiff in Wales.
Oh, wow. I went to university there. So.
Wow, I love the connections. Just this morning, I sent Eva an article on something I'm researching for myself personally, and she's like, "Oh, brava, you looked up something scientific." So I have her seal of approval on my research. Woo! I am qualified to teach kids how to find a reliable source. Yay! Oh, go ahead with introductions. I just had to butt in there.
I'll go next. Sandra is my name. I live in Ireland. I'm originally from Serbia. I'm a trainer, youth worker, in short. Yes, I'll leave it there because I think that's the main interest for you maybe in this stage. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you for putting your 2 cents in. I love this sort of cosmopolitan approach here because I'm finding that we can all learn and grow. So Deidre, round out the circle here.
I'm Deidre. I'm in BC, Canada. I'm originally from Newfoundland, and I'm very Irish, Sandra. So we have a connection there. I am many things as well, like Eva. I'm a counselor, so I work in a school, so like Benjamin, so all sorts of connections happening. I work in a school with kids, it's my full time, but then I also do private practice with adults. I work with ecotherapy, I work in mathematics, I work in feminist narrative. Those are my big approaches, and teach some counseling courses at a college, and and love to write as well. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Yay!
Right. So to recap, I think most of you know me, and that's why you're here, but the credential part of it, I've been teaching public school and through in a year and a half of a private school just for good measure. 22 or so years I've worked in special education environments. I have an interest in gifted learning. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in theater. I studied cinematography. I have a master's in education, and I'm licensed to be a school administrator in both Texas and Tennessee. And I'm a registered yoga teacher and a writer and a mother and a wife, and just like everybody here, we care about kids, and we want to see how we can reach them and we can make connections, because I think we all are able to identify our own struggles. We're cognitively grounded enough to see that in ourselves, and then to witness that in the youth that we serve. So the big overarching question here is, how can we reach the kids we need to reach that are harder to reach? I know that those folks that are over in the UK time zone, right now you're able to be here because it doesn't conflict, but as we move into these 5 weeks, it will conflict. So I think my plan is to try for the fall to have a more international approach, but for right now to try to round up the troops here stateside, North America, South America, so we can grow in some numbers over here right now. And so that's my main goal here. And since we've all had experience in circles and we know that everything that happens in the circle stays in the circle, I think we could really just get right down to a brainstorming session with maybe a centering breath or 3. Does anybody want to lead those 3 breaths, or shall we just take our own space and just take some 3 collective breaths here and just land? I don't know what kind of morning you've had, but mine started off with a bang. Actually a whisper, but I know the bang's coming. Another deep breath there. Invite in what you need. Release something that you don't. So if I could invite someone to pipe in and just offer your gut impression. Hey, Renee, thanks for joining in here. Renee is up in Pennsylvania.
Sorry.
Go ahead and introduce yourself real quick.
Oh, first of all, I'm sorry. Zoom is not cooperating with me today, so it took me like 10 minutes just to get in. I'm Renee Weintraub Calendar. I live in a town called Bala Cynwyd in Pennsylvania. It's right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And for those of you that might follow sports, we're the hometown of Kobe Bryant. Am I doing an introduction? Who I am?
Yeah, we're doing kind of 1 minute. This is me in an elevator pitch.
All right. Okay. I've been an occupational therapist for about 35 years. And in the last 5 or 6 years, I've been doing non-traditional occupational therapy by doing volunteer work in the Federal Detention Center, Women's Prison in Philadelphia, teaching nonviolent communication, NVC, started by Marshall Rosenberg. And I've studied that for over 10 years, and now I'm learning how to teach it, not just practice it. So I've been there for 2 years. I work on a crisis and suicide hotline, working with people in trauma, in crisis, people who are lonely, holding space for them. And I run a coalition for youth of Lower Merion and Narberth, which are towns in our county. And it was developed in 1999 in response to an event called Columbine, where 2 youths shot and murdered students in their school. So our township wanted to know what to do in case something like that could happen. And over the years, we've created programs and organizations have formed that go into the school and address the health and safety needs of kids. I've run it for the last 2 years as we are going into new directions and seeing what is now our purpose, since we have many of these organizations. And I'm a mom of a 22-year-old and a mom of a dog named Norbu and a cat named Milo. And
okay, so you've survived the adolescent years and you're well qualified, well versed in many areas. Autumn, I thought I saw Autumn sneak in here. Maybe she's on a different, let me go to a different view here so I can see everybody. So Autumn, if you could just jump in with a 1 minute elevator pitch. So.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Autumn, and I actually live not too far from Renee in New Jersey, right on the border of Pennsylvania. So I'm I think about an hour away from Philadelphia. And I am the mother of 3 boys. I have 2 teens at home now. So I have a 14, well, just about 15 this month, 18-year-old and a 32-year-old son. So I've had, quite a bit of, I'm in up to here with the teens. So this really spoke to me. So the work that I do mostly is with movement and meditation and creative expression. So my background was of an actress, dance, not like super professional, but some, but what I've loved to do through my whole life. And so what I focus on now is using those aspects for healing and self-healing. I experienced trauma early on and kind of ongoing. And also as a person of color, I'm realizing how much the trauma of racialization has affected my life. So that's something else that I explore in the collective healing, which certainly manifests for everyone and teens as well. So anyhow, I really focus on self-healing, guiding mostly women I work with. I have a background as a doula. And I'm here because I have an interest in teens because of my own. And also I homeschooled for a while and also was involved in Waldorf education. So a bit much more involved in my children's education in a very hands-on way. And I feel that I definitely have something to offer that, more than the mainstream in terms of what usually gets noticed, in school. And so I see the difference between like my kids in the public school and, how things were homeschooling and in Waldorf. So want to just contribute and help. So I'm here for that.
I would like to express my gratitude that you've all come together. We all have the same vision. Perhaps we're all going about it in just a little bit different ways. I know that Renee and I touched base fairly early in these circles and connected. We've talked at length about, she's got an opportunity through, I believe it's like a drug and alcohol type program for some funding for something. And I think there's a lot of ways that this material, this work can get done, but the focus of this circle, as Renee and I have come to develop it in these last 8 weeks from the experience of the circles and realizing that the kids who need to be there just aren't coming. They're not knowing about it. Like I'm happy to put money into it. I have a few bucks. I get not a lot, like not Mark Walsh money, but I have, I got 20 bucks here or there to throw an ad that may make a little difference. And by opening it up on Eventbrite for donations, I could possibly roll a little of that, actually all of that would go to that actually. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of in terms of generating some funding now, because the reality is I'm going to have to get word out, period. The Facebook algorithms and even the Facebook advertising doesn't necessarily do that great of a job. But I think we all have expertise that we know is valuable for adult humans. And I think we also know we're all speaking the same thing. It's valuable, applicable to the kids. So some ways that I've been trying to make it accessible in my classroom is just having them write about things like, got a story to share about a quote you heard or read that has inspired you ever since. Tell your story. And so we write that out. It's usually really cute. Doesn't really show up on this camera, which is why I was trying, Ben, to get my phone to be a document camera so we can make it truly like interactive. I think that'll really help us as we're trying to use Zoom technology and digital technology for these kids. It really needs to be still very active. I feel like I'm, running a show in the classroom to keep their interest a lot. We had a lovely discussion in one circle, when does courage become bravado? I keep doing that, you can't read it. When does courage become bravado? And then something I can remember to do for my own well-being is, and to me, that just breaks it down in a real basic language. My goal is to be the adult in my kids' lives, my students' life that I needed when I was younger. And to teach them before they lose their voice to claim it. I think it'll make all of our jobs a little easier. I'm not interested in job security to fix everything, to help them heal everything on the other end. I really want to give them down-to-earth tools that someone who's not a yoga teacher, who's not a youth coalition worker or a professional psychotherapist or a dancer can translate and embody for their own kids. So who's got some ideas bubbling up? I don't want to talk anymore. I want to hear from you.
I have a question. So my question is, you're doing something for caregivers of teens, but what age are those teens? Because I've been thinking, and I have a feeling that teens of different ages are extremely different from each other. And so that's the question for me, because I have an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old and then a 14-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And when my eldest were younger, it was just so different from how it is now, since they were maybe 15 upwards, when it's kind of, I think myself as a mother years ago wouldn't have believed that my children do the things they do at the moment years ago. That, you know, the challenges that I face, I would have been quite smug going, well, my children aren't like that, my children are fine. So yeah, that's just throwing out a challenge, probably. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
No answer.
I received that for sure because I have a 16-year-old who will be 17 in 2 weeks, going on 35. And then I have a 14-year-old, still 10. Yeah, so they're very different. And my first thought, and I hope it's not a defense mechanism, but my first thought was that they're the same tools. They're still the same tools. So a parent of a 10-year-old and a parent of an 18-year-old can use their own inner knowing and parenting skill to adapt it appropriate to their child. So, and we could say that in our instruction, you know, if you have a child who's, you know, 10 years old and has trouble staying still, don't expect him to stay still for 5 minutes to explore the feelings that come up in this meditation. You need to do this for 1 minute.
Carrie, can I? Yeah, I have to go to another meeting, so I just want to share a few things. I am part of like European level pool of trainers who work in the youth field. And we're without work at the moment because all the youth centers are closed, travels are not allowed, and stuff. And at the moment, the big discussion is, yes, how can we actually move all of our work online? And there's a lot of hesitation because there's a lot of regulations and child policy protection and stuff, things that we spoke about. But also as a recurring topic is this well-being, you know, like what are we doing for the well-being of youth? And from what I'm understanding is that actually the youth workers or the trainers in the youth field know very little about the well-being as a core concept before the embodiment, you know, like, or they speak about well-being as a positive mental health thing. So it's very narrowed. So my question is, would you focus this really on caregivers or, you know, youth workers, support workers, parents, or would you involve young people as well? Because like I have massive pool of trainers and contacts of people who would be interested in this. The times wouldn't work. And because, you know, if you're to mix, they will not come because they just cannot, you know, expose themselves to this risk of, you know, to go against child protection policies and stuff. Just something throwing out there.
I feel that too. Initially, the idea was born that it would be caregivers and teens on the same call, and this was not necessarily professional caregivers. It was mainly just parents, mainly parents. They might happen to be professionals, but mainly just parents, because I think we all also know that what works in a professional environment doesn't always translate to our own children. So initially it was direct parents or guardians of children, and then their kids would come too, and then we would do breakout sessions that were children-led and adult-led. So we would separate within that particular hour. But as the 8 weeks rolled out, there were not that many adult participants. There were mainly just youth participants, and they were of varying ages, but there was not like a consistency really, and like a buildup or a following. And I think our pool is really small, you know, again, how many kids would of their own accord go and do this, right?
But that's my question, Carrie, because for example, all of the youth workers that I'm connected with, they already have their target group and they're very happy to work with them. So the people they work with, they're happy to come to the Zoom chat room because there's already trust, they already know each other, or whatever the case is. So would it be more useful to you and your time to work with caregivers, youth workers specifically, rather than youth, and that way empower youth workers and caregivers, teachers to do this work that you're doing, but within their, you know, target group and language group and everything else?
Yeah, I think you bring up a very good point, and I also think in that imparting information to caregivers, also giving the caregivers an opportunity to get care themselves. And Carrie, I'm going back to Breathe for Change. I'll go get my t-shirt so we can match. Carrie and I
I'm at Benjamin.
And Benjamin. Okay, we both did it on opposite sides of the United States, unbeknownst to each other, and we found that was a commonality. But we can connect and empower the caregivers too, for them to have well-being and self-care. And then they can go back and then maybe eventually move into youth. But I think you bring up a very good point. I run this problem in my coalition. Getting youth to come and talk on a Zoom, they're not interested. They're not interested in doing that. They don't know me. They don't want more grown-ups. I just was on another Zoom meet. I shared a little bit with Carrie of a possible approach. But for the purposes of this, I would tend to agree with Sandra. But I did hear you say something that you think the time is not good for
Europe, it would be 11 in the evening in UK or in Ireland where I am, and
Okay.
so I'm connected to the. Yes, I'm connected to whole Europe. So in Greece and Bulgaria is 1 in the morning. You know, so it's just for the next 5 weeks it's a bit challenging.
But can I ask you a question? Thank you so much. I still haven't figured out like times. I have a hard enough time trying to figure out where Carrie is. You know, I'm so like focused in on Pensy. If we just did caregivers, do we run into the same legal issues with being able to video it and then make it available for caregivers at another time to watch what we've done?
No, you shouldn't. And actually, if you're recording to a cloud carrier, I'm not sure if you knew that, it records only the speaker, so you don't necessarily see. You still have to get consent. I mean, verbal consent is enough, but no, you don't get into the trouble.
And this
But
is for me, so I don't forget anything.
Yeah,
I won't share it anywhere.
Yeah, I have to go now, so I'm going to be late. So
Okay.
I'll talk to you, Carrie, later, and all of you.
Got it.
Good luck.
Great points. And that is truly what Renee had brought up. And she did specifically speak to that Breathe for Change model. You know, that saved me as a burnout teacher. And I see burnout in my classroom. I'm not necessarily really closely aligned to Breathe for Change per se, because I also do this embodiment work. I do traditional yoga, theater, improv, etc. But yes, I've talked to my administration. My administration is like, yes, we're interested in you building this out, writing this curriculum. And so my plan is to kind of workshop it for my English department, just to kind of show them some of the techniques, some of the things that they could then infuse into their classroom. I just think it's a more approachable, accessible way to reach these kids in 10-minute increments, 20-minute increments, instead of hour-long yoga sessions. Some kids, I think, are going to be turned off by yoga.
We wouldn't even be able to say yoga in some of the schools that I'm looking at introducing, because yoga is religion. So you can't call it in the public schools even that. It has to be, you know, movement, mindful movement, you know, something else.
So I just wanted to clarify, you may have said it in the beginning, but so the circle, the way I read it, it's for caregivers, but not for kids, right? At this point, and it's 30 minutes.
Yes.
I'm curious why it's 30 minutes and not an hour. Is there a specific reason for that? Just curious.
Well,
and then I'll say my thoughts on the 30 minutes, but I wanted to see if there was something specific.
Sure, I can tell you what the design was, absolutely. So initially it went to 30 minutes because I thought that might be another way to reach the kids. The kids like, oh, I can do something for 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then when it evolved into doing something for caregivers, then it was like, well, they're the busiest people I know. So maybe they need it to be only 30 minutes too.
This in my experience and my intuition also, you know, just a kind of a gut feeling about it as well. But 30 minutes seems to be short. I mean, it is short, duh, but it just feels to me that it's not enough time to go deep enough to get the kind of, I think the fullness of it to be able to take something. I mean, I'm sure it can be done, you know, it can be designed that way, but I just feel like with, say, learning a practice, something simple that can be applied, right? Which you would want to spend, even if it's a simple breath practice, if it's new for people, they're going to need to, you know, learn about it, try it, ask questions about it, you know, kind of get it, right? And I also, so even if it's just that, but then having enough time for people to really ask questions, connect with each other, you know, obviously depending on the size of the group. I know we have breakout rooms and such. But it seems like if there are people who are already, if there are people who are already doing these kinds of practices, you know, like us, they're speaking to the choir, you know, preaching to the choir, whatever. So 30 minutes is like, all right, we dive in and we're like ready to go and we get it. But with people who this is new for and the ideas are like, oh, wow, you know, I never thought of that, that are more in their head, it seems to me that there might be more time for them, needed for them to ease into it, to feel more comfortable, to be able to share. And so that's one thought about the time length. The other question and thought I had about it as well, particularly if the time was shorter, is about connections after. Like having the circle is awesome. And I know that's the format of the embodiment circles and the conference. So, you know, that you're working within the format. But for me as a parent or as a, you know, whatever, if I was thinking, you know, if I'm coming to it, I would want to have some kind of follow-up, like, where do I go after this, right? Like, I learned this thing and now I'm starting to do it. And of course we're going to meet for 5 weeks, but then after that, or if I want to go, you know, do more, or if I want to, you know, partner with people to really get into this more and practice it more. So I'm just curious if there's some kind of thoughts about that, or, you know, I mean, it can go anywhere, but it just, that those are my thoughts of what could be needed.
Would it be possible to do something like the half hour as a program, like we did for the COVID Calm thing, where we have like half hour of really like the thing, and the other half hour, because there's probably nothing scheduled straight away after, for people to connect. So the official thing closes, but if people want to hang out and just talk, they can do another half hour of like asking questions and connecting.
That sounds like a great idea. I was just thinking, now that you mention it, in one of my training programs in Daring to Rest, we have our class time, and then we have a half hour of after class for those who want to connect. And that's really helpful. We close it at the end, and then that's great. Yeah. Carrie, what do you think?
Carrie, your mic.
I am always about that delicate balance, that give, that take, because again, I wasn't married to an hour long. I think I wanted to honor those parents that feel rushed and feel restricted by time. And I think this is a wonderful way to do that, but also honor those who want to go deeper. It's just like naturally built scaffolding. It's like the core meeting is 30 minutes and we give you as much time to linger, to have a private conversation or something like that after. It's kind of nice. I like it. Yep. Anybody else have some things bubbling up before I change gears and speak to one of those questions?
I think one of the hardest things that we all struggle with in getting any group to pick up something like this, and I speak from personal experience, having not done yoga in God knows how long, is generalization, is taking it from the circle to real life. And we can give them the tools, but I think it would be important to consider how we get the generalization. So you can do it in the circle, you can do it this time, but what does it really look like in real life when I get so angry at my dad or get so angry at the teacher that I can't function? And then where to go from there? Yeah.
That's a wonderful question. So I want to answer.
Can I speak to that for a second?
Yeah. Let me wrap myself a note so I don't forget any of these answers.
I just think that, because I know that I'm thinking in a similar way as Benjamin in terms of like how to bring it, like thinking of the school situation, thinking of real life practices. And this is why I think what Sandra said in terms about connecting with the people who already have a strong relationship with the youth. So I'm thinking connecting with school counselors, connecting with youth workers, connecting with those people who can then be that person they come back to, you know, in between. I think that's a really powerful thing to think about. So it's not so much a drop in, you know, once a week type thing, but it's like I'm learning these skills from a person that I already deeply trust and I can return to them. So it's more of like a long-term thing. So training the trainers might be the best way to start. That's what I'm thinking too. I totally resonate with what Sandra mentioned. So yeah, there you go. It's like seeding. Yes, it is. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And eventually reaching those ones, but like starting from the seed. I think that's brilliant, Autumn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was also thinking about like teaching embodied skills that are like not like a set practice, like a breathing exercise or something, but more like in terms of observation that we could like let them do in breakout groups together that are useful with adults and for kids. I have a couple of things around that from the Tune Into Children model from Ale Duarte. I don't know if any of you know him or his model, because I've been assisting on his courses for a while now.
It's his name in the chat. How do you spell it? Thank you.
No, Tune Into. Well, figure it out on that title. I think that's brilliant work, and I'm not sure how many of us on the call have gone through embodied yoga principles training. Is that anybody here? Okay, because that is primarily one of the modalities that I would use in terms of reaching these practitioners. So, I mean, to say it loosely, this would kind of be like the Breathe for Change for the embodiment conference type thing. You know, like this could be an outreach into schools and those professionals who then get trained, who then train other teachers and support other teachers in these ways, and then infuse these little 5-minute cool downs, 5-minute check yourselves throughout the day, all of those kinds of things as a general way of being, as a way of living, not as much as a practice, like a 30-minute yoga practice in the morning or in the evening, but as in, oh my gosh, my dad is driving me crazy. I'm going to pretend I have to go to the bathroom and I'm going to stand there and I'm going to take a stand for what I believe in. I'm just going to stand here and feel what that feels like in my body and get myself and call up that last time that I felt calm and recognize it in my body, those kinds of things. Because that's what embodied yoga principles is all about, is taking yoga off the mat and applying it. And in fact, all of the 26 poses in that yoga principles or postures, Mark calls them, can be modified into many poses. So I went on a job interview, and, you know, I have confidence troubles sometimes. Like going into a job interview, I needed a little extra. And, you know, I really didn't feel like I could stand out there, like in the parking lot. And like really channel my inner authority, but I can do that on a micro level. And I can do that anytime. I can do that under the table if I'm having an argument with my spouse. Or I could do, you know, this one's like, this is like boundaries or no. So it's really a way of embodying your feeling and getting yourself to a place where you can embody the feeling that you need to make it in that moment. That's what it is to me. So that's how I would address the taking it off the mat and, you know, getting it to practitioners. And so these 5 weeks, while we've locked in a time zone that doesn't work with those in a UK time zone, could be a, you know, a testing ground where we're workshopping it, seeing what kinds of things work, don't work, seeing if that 30-minute intensive model with 30 minutes afterwards to discuss works. I don't know. I don't know if it's worth right now trying to get a different time zone. I know that Renee was really limited in when she would be able to. So I don't want that to, yeah, I'm not sure. These are all great things to think about. I did want to drop this real quick. I think it was Autumn, you asked about further like resources. This is every week when I did the Teens Circle, I would create a document, and it gave them different links to other resources that they might be able to go out and chase down on their own and explore the ones that most resonated for them. So I hope you can access that. I'm not sure.
Nope, can't.
All right, let me fix it. I can't chew gum and talk at the same time. So let me go back. Let's see here. Only people added. Okay, so then if we go, oh, let's do this.
Doing that. Can I?
You can just request access though. It's easy enough to do.
I got it. This is it. This is
Okay.
going to be better. Okay. Apologies. I don't know why that setting got set that way. Usually it's anyone with the link, but it had been changed.
Carrie, I just would like to speak to what you said in terms of the experimentation part of it, but also bringing it, like doing something more with it, potentially in the fall. And that's a really beautiful way to kind of unfold it, I think. Like you're trying it out now, you're trying it out throughout the summer, and then come September, people are feeling confident enough to bring it forward. And then I'm wondering, because the conference is in October, is there a section for kids or youth in the conference? I wonder if Mark has thought about adding a certain channel or something for, because that could be a nice way of like bringing it forward and then having them be able to connect to a wider group as well. The ones who are really deeply interested in embodiment, you know, that might be a really cool way to kind of bridge it into the conference. And I don't know if there's anything planned for kids and youth, or I think for parents there are, but maybe not specifically for that population. It's just an idea, or like having an embodiment conference for youth. Who knows? This could move in a certain direction, right? By starting small and playing with it. Yeah.
Can I make a few points? They're a bit random, but talking about caregivers of teens, just because of what my job happens to be, so I'm working in the housing directorate of a government, and what we're seeing is that there's a lot of young people,
Oh my God,
16 or 17-year-olds at the moment being made homeless because they're being thrown out of their houses, or they can't sofa surf anymore, etc. So there's a lot more youth homelessness, and they're being given homes at the moment because all governments, I think, are making such an effort not to have people rough sleeping at the moment. So, and therefore, a lot of people who don't usually deal that much with youth, housing staff, are dealing with youth who have just been made homeless, probably gone through a lot of trauma before coming to that point. And we're seeing, I mean, this is confidential, but in Wales we're seeing firearms problems, knives, drugs, prostitution, overdoses, etc. And all these people who have no experience really of dealing with youth because they're security guard or something, you know. There's more scope, I think, than you might know of in terms of people who are caregivers and where you could market this. Just an idea. And another point I wanted to make that we've realised in my circle, in the Welsh circle, is that we're talking at the moment of the trauma that people are going through at the moment. But what we believe in our circle is that the trauma of coming out of this will be worse than the trauma of going into this. In the same way as when I went to Uganda for 8 weeks, it was a completely different culture. But it was amazing. It was so new and it was a challenge and we were doing something good and etc. Coming home to Wales after that was horrible. I didn't want to go out of my house. I didn't know who I was anymore because I'd changed during that experience, and going back to normal was horrible. And therefore that there's a share whenever that happens, that might be just something to yeah, that's it.
I have to take a big deep breath because I feel like this is huge. It's huge. This is so important. I'm like almost like my stomach's almost like ooh, with the enormity of it. So yeah, you know, I think it's like start where you are, which is I got a 5-week slot at, you know, 5 o'clock Central Time on Thursday evenings, you know, and that does work for Americans. And let's be frank here, Americans are grossly further disembodied than many other civilized cultures. What, did I say that out loud?
But I'm also wondering, Carrie, now that I'm hearing this, and I'm probably one of those people that are very United States oriented, even though I'm married to a man not from the United States, is that maybe I know that the social structures support maybe more, and I may be wrong with this, so please correct me, in Europe and other countries than what we have as support here in the United States. And maybe more of our target audiences who can run with it more might be more in Europe. And then we maybe can either look at, you know, different times now that I'm being, you know, educated to broaden my scope, or this recording, but then getting, you know, people to be engaged in listening to the recording.
Well, and the whole recording aspect, which I mean, I guess I say it out loud, as an entrepreneur with that yoga business and the container home that we rent on Airbnb and stuff, I'm learning, and I forgot what I was going to say because it's like I get ADHD when I get really excited. It's that manic thing coming in, just like all the ideas. I would love, first of all, to consider changing the time if we think we could get more momentum where momentum is already moving and get that sort of flowing a little more freely. I'm down with that if you are considering changing the time. And so I want to just put that out there right now while I get my wits and think about what I was going to say, because that's an important point to stop on.
Well, is my understanding make sense for those of you that are in Europe and can kind of compare?
Yep.
You think, yeah, more of our target audience is in outside the United States, I'll say.
I mean, that's really what I'm feeling.
wanted to add to that with, is it, am I pronouncing your name right? Siwan? How do you say it?
Close enough. Shuan, yeah.
Siwan?
Yeah.
Okay. Siwan, from what you just shared, which was like, it brought in a whole reality check that was, you know, heavy, but also just real and like it was actually very grounding to me, because, you know, I live in a little bubble in rural New Jersey, and, you know, it's like different. I also have been dealing with, in the last month, and I'm, you know, I have been shared this with everyone. I shared with Carrie, my son, my eldest son had a mental breakdown out in Seattle, which, as he was seeking help, he got into an altercation and ended up in jail, and then, you know, had further trauma, and then was sent to a hospital, which he's now, you know, doing well. And he had not had any mental health crisis before. And, you know, so the reason I'm mentioning that is because what I heard you say is that you described an acute situation that's happening now, that's exacerbated by this pandemic, you know, and it's bringing up all of the things that were underlying to begin with. So what I see in terms of offering something, you know, as this circle is being offered and we're talking about it, there's different things. Like, there's people who are dealing with an acute situation, people who are dealing with an acute situation in their work or out, or in, you know, working with youth that are not part of their family, but that they're encountering, right? And that are professionals, or maybe, you know, either professionals who work with youth like Renee, or maybe they're regular folks who don't usually work with youth, like you described with, you know, your job and the security guard and stuff. So there's distinctions of what they would need. Like in my personal situation, I was dealing with an acute situation. And then at home, I'm dealing with two teens who, you know, have a pretty cozy life here. But as a mom, I was dealing with nurturing myself and taking care of myself and making sure that I'm regulated in my home, because we're all at home all the time. And making sure that I can be regulating myself so that we are co-regulating, you know, and that my home does, you know, stays more of a sanctuary, and making allowance for all of the stuff that's rising in my teens who, you know, still have stuff, you know, I mean, there's a lot that they're missing and losing. And so everyone's having their stuff come up, but in different ways. And so I guess I just see a distinction between what could be offered for these different circumstances that people are in. Like for me, I'm very much working with, my thing is working with mothers. Like I said, I'm trained as a doula, and, you know, I really feel very clear about what I can offer for a mom who is, you know, which is a different way of relating to someone than a teacher. I have a friend who has a business called The Noble Teacher, where she teaches caregiving to teachers through Kundalini yoga principles. And she goes into schools and does some beautiful work. So that's different. I would not feel, you know, that would be my thing to do, because I don't have that experience, and it's a different way of relating. I mean, even though at the core, we're all relating as human beings, but so it seems like the circle, to me, it seems like it needs to have more of a specific, like niching, like Mark was saying, you know, who is this for exactly? Because I think it is sort of different. You know, it is different. You know, it's like, is it for me in an acute situation? Is it for someone, you know, like preparing at home so that, you know, things don't get out of control in the future? You know, very different things. So that's my observation here as we're talking about it.
And my thoughts on that is, maybe what if you didn't want to go down the niche, although I agree that would be a good idea, is it more something to do with adults who are triggered by teenage behaviors, and therefore to look at what that trigger was in themselves.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant.
I have a concern though.
Yes.
And looking at it from the seed perspective, working in public schools in Texas only, it has been my experience. And I know that when I've worked with groups in the past to do these big interventions, what it really came down to is finding the group that's actually going to use it and implement it. So for example, from my own experience only, when you're talking about a group of teachers and you want to teach the whole grade level or the whole campus, only 5 or 6 of those are going to actually do what you were talking about. And I think that's that seed model that we were talking about. And instead of going, well, these teachers teach social studies, so we're only going to teach it this way, what we found is you give them the tool and let them translate it, because that's the only time they're going to buy into it. So if you go into a specific niche, then what we found is people that aren't within that niche that end up in the group, because inevitably it happens, say, well, this was a waste of my time because they only taught this, or I can't do this because I'm not A, B, or C. When what we're talking about here is just a way of living, a way of breathing, a paradigm, rather than a specific tool set. So I worry about the niches. Niches? I don't know.
It's tricky. It's tricky. It's like, Renee, I remembered what I was going to say about the recordings, because you had mentioned recordings before. As an entrepreneur, I think the natural propensity is to, create the content, and it's very much, all over the place, not just in the embodiment conference, but, Mark has that free now, pay later model where he'll do a workshop and then someone can then buy it later. I think if we were to develop this further,
Yes,
that's where we would explore something like recording. I feel like we're in a workshop phase, even if we were to figure out a smaller target group, let's just, we're all trying to do the same things, and we're all needing to be well resourced ourselves. So
right.
I love the idea of the triggered, because that does kind of cross different paths, because you don't know which social studies teacher is going to need it, which English teacher will need it, which home care worker will need it that didn't think they needed it before. But I can see a distinction between those who already work with kids and then those who have never worked with kids, so they don't even have an inkling of like Maslow's, Gardner's, adolescent brain development. They're completely out of it, which would mostly be your standard parent too, right? So that's two different clear niches right there. That's how I see it unfolding right away without sleeping on it.
My feeling is also that parents and people who work professionally with youth are like two different target groups that don't mix that well. Usually, I myself have taught courses for both, and that usually has this, but my kid is different kind of thing.
Yeah.
And from our professional perspective, this is how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a question. So based on the last sessions of the embodiment circles, what is the population that's being attracted to come to the embodiment circles? Are you finding more professionals that are coming, or in general, have they done, any look at that, or is it more, all right, I'm just say regular folk, that might include parents?
just generally for all circles?
Yes. Where is the marketing? How is the word getting out? Like, I found out about the whole embodiment conference because algorithms on Facebook saw that I kind of liked this stuff. And so they threw it out at me last year or 2 years ago, whenever he did the first one. When I went to go do it, I found it completely overwhelming and didn't participate at all because I couldn't figure out what to do when. And I wrote, and then he opened up talking, and I don't know how I managed to connect and say, you know, it wasn't usable for me. So I'm wondering who's the target audience that was attracted in the last 8 weeks? Who's it being marketed to?
Eva, do you have that answer?
Well, I can only speak for the circles that I've been at, and generally what my impression is from like who's been joining the Facebook group, because I was the one who was accepting most of the people into the Facebook group. So I saw the profiles coming in, and my impression is that while there is like a little bit more the weight on people who already do some embodiment stuff, who have their own practice somehow. So there's like lots of yoga teachers, lots of, I teach dance, I do this, I do that. But there is also maybe 40% is people who don't seem to be connected to these practices before, or at least not like in a professional way, or maybe 50-50.
Okay, so maybe we could choose which one of those populations we want to gear ourselves to.
Yeah, I mean that's I'm hearing 3 different programs out of this, and I don't have a tricky or a fun name maybe for the third one, but you know, the Triggered by Teens, you know, for the parents who are going through their stuff. That's what's happening in my house. Care for caregivers, those that are facing burnout, and honestly, that alone would be enough. Mm-hmm. And then you could have a third target, which is caregivers who are already fairly resourced, who want another tool and want a way to bring it to the kids that they serve. Yep. I see 3 different things happening here. So I do feel like we probably need to make a decision about one of those 3. And maybe because we already have a slot that's convenient, Renee, I mean, I don't know, maybe we just charge forward with that and pick the target audience that we could easily serve in that time slot, which would probably be Triggered by Teens. And maybe as we move forward, I mean, again, I think it's big. I don't think, you know, I think just because we have to start small doesn't mean that even by August, it couldn't already spread to a couple of different themed circles. So
I think there's also one circle that's like a parent circle on the schedule.
Yes.
So just, I would need to look up the timing, but just so that maybe it would be interesting to see like how it compares.
I think that circle might have a lot of parents of younger children in it.
Okay.
Guessing.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I don't have it written, but yeah, there is a parenting group, but it's different than what we're offering. Right?
Yeah, just in terms of the program, just right. so it's clear like what is what.
Right. They do mention parents, so it might be, you know, not to mention parents, but if we're addressing people who get triggered, and then the concept would be more looking at how you get triggered and owning your triggers, which Carrie and I haven't like talked about, like where our skills, but my skill is nonviolent communication. So I would want people to drop into what are their feelings, what are they needing, and so that applies to triggering, owning your own triggers, taking responsibility for your feelings. So that speaks to me, that first one. And we don't have to say parents.
Right? Naming your feelings, having the emotional vocabulary. I think that's a strong issue in social and emotional learning in our schools these days. So, okay. Oh my gosh. My mind is so blown. You guys are amazing.
Amazing. Really, this is amazing. What a think tank.
Thank you for showing up for this, for the kids in your lives, for me, and trying to get a handle on this really big, important idea. I'm going to sleep on it a little bit. I'm going to write some things out. And I would love it if it's easier for me to send word to you via email, because I would love to just like continue the conversation just via email, or even in that group that I pulled from different conversations over these last 8 weeks, just because I think the niching is right. And I would just almost like to lay it all out there, because this isn't mine. This is the community's, and there may be people who would be completely willing to pop in and lead one of these other circles that we've got a brainchild about here. It just may not be me, and I can relinquish that for sure, so yeah, if you want me to email you, put your email down in there. I know that we're coming up, we got officially 10 minutes before we have to be completely off of the Circles, Embodiment Circles Zoom channel. So if anybody had any other things, I think I can accept a little more.
I just wanted to say out loud what I wrote in the chat in case you didn't see it. Cause I just was taking in everything, and realized, when Carrie said the word resourced within, and really that's what it's about. And so, and Benjamin saying that it's like, the people who want to do it, those are the people that are going to do it. You know what I mean? Like, they're the ones that are going to. So that's pretty common to everyone, regardless of their circumstance. It's those who want to do it. So even though eventually to niche into all these different circumstances, but I realized at the core was the resourcing. So what I wrote was like a little description: becoming more resourced in yourself, or building your inner resources to connect more effectively. And I, after that, would also put the word more compassionately and effectively. And I would use the words connect and communicate with teens more compassionately and effectively, without burning out. Or we could, use words while, still maintaining your own balance or whatever. I mean, I just feel like that's really at the core of it. And then people can take that to use wherever. And then, obviously moving out into like specifics and specialties. But really, if we're not coming from those resourcing ourselves, it doesn't matter how old the kid is or what the techniques are and everything. The main thing I notice for teens is that as a mom, it's like they're separating. Like I want to tell them what to do still and all that, but they are separating, and that is natural. But they still need to be held. They need to be held so compassionately, because they're not ready to be like totally out in the world yet. And, if we can't hold ourselves compassionately, we can't hold space for them, yes. And I think that as a culture and a society and a world, like we don't hold space for ourselves. We're kind of as a culture not even capable of holding space for them. So that's really part of like, and so we come up against them that are like freaking out, and they know that like they're not feeling secure, not just because they don't have a home, but because they don't feel like anybody gives a fuck about them, and that anybody can even hold their power. So that's what I feel like we can do. So thank you all, because that downloaded because everything that everybody contributed, that wasn't just mine, that was like the group that's what came in.
Good job.
Thank you for
I loved how you said fear of holding their power. I just love that. Holding their power. That's beautiful.
Yep.
I like the resources for compassion too, or compassion resources.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm finding in my own life, and it's hard, and it's been really hard. But the more that I ground myself in my own, in compassion for myself, and that is in my movement, my body, my breathing, what I eat, everything, every aspect of my life, the better my kids get.
Yep.
And I wasn't able to do that before. And that's why my 32-year-old is breaking down now, because it's like he's he's doing, like, he's exploding the stuff that he didn't get held as a teen, that I didn't have the resources for. And now I have the resources to have that, hold that for him, you know, now. But I recognize it, and I feel like that's what we're needing, because it brings up our own teen that didn't get held, right?
And I
So
think
like, we're all a bunch of 16-year-olds running around, you know, trying to run the planet. You know?
if we got to the intellectual age of 15 or 16, you know, some people are still stuck at 9 or 10 or wherever their biggest trauma was. And so we have to meet them wherever they are. And I think, you know, parenting that child within, maybe not necessarily using those terms. I mean, that could be a whole separate workshop altogether. Yeah. I just want to leave you with, I'm not going to read this to you, but I would say go read it. On Children, the Prophet. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. And Autumn, you reminded me that they're pulling away, and they're doing what they're supposed to do, and they are becoming their own. They're flying free and alone. But that doesn't mean that I don't talk to them anymore. That doesn't mean that I give them all the space they're asking for. I still have to hold that container for them to grow, and I still have to try my best to lead it, and I can't lead them if I'm not leading myself. So of course, I just want to sit here for just a second and let this settle. So I would like to leave you with Inner Pose. This is embodied yoga principles. And it is very much like your traditional yoga, your Tadasana, your mountain pose with prayer hands. But make sure that your neck is tilted down. And as you've dropped into your body here, you're just noticing if it feels familiar. Where could you use a little bit more of this in your life? Notice if you're putting a lot of effort into doing this exactly right. Like, are my hands in the right position? And you don't have to judge that. You can just notice it. What would it feel like if you gave it just 10% less effort? And does that feel more sustainable? And take a big deep breath here, and if you closed your eyes, you can open them back up. In the interest of time, I took us into that inner pose quickly, which speaks to Autumn saying we want more time. But again, sometimes all you have time for in a crisis and in a triggering situation is a micro pose. And TMI perhaps, but quite literally, when my husband was raging yesterday, I stood in the doorway in between he and my son, and I just took a breath. I took a stand. I mean, literally in my mind, I said, you stand right here. So I think in just a minute, that idea of taking a stand or just listening, it really can be that fast. So I want to wrap us up here. I'm going to save the chat. So I've got all of your emails. And if you don't mind, everybody lean in and unmute your mic. And maybe just shout out just the first word that you think of right now.
Peace.
Love.
Connected.
Chaos.
Beautiful group.
Full.
There's a
Joy.
great song by Dermot McKinney. Ben, I'll send you a link. It's about the subtle beauty and the balance between chaos and art. So I feel that word too. Thank you, beautiful, beautiful human being. Have a lovely rest of your evening or afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Carrie. Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care.
Everybody.
I
Wow.
will send you my
Let's do our own Zoomy thing, you and I. Let's find a time when it works to do our Zoomy thing so that we can talk curriculum and talk thoughts and strengths. It's clear to me kind of where our two areas of strengths are, but yeah, let's talk. This was an amazing brain dumpy group you put together to really like help clarify. You're really teaching me how you build things, because I don't, often, I just sort of wing things here and there, but you're giving me this beautiful container and structure of, how do we grow something? And I totally understand what you're saying about the videoing, because we don't want to really release something that's not what we want. And yeah, I always forget we do want to look to monetizing, because we do want to support our families and our dreams and our desires. And I think we're really onto something that could really grow.
Yes.
And baby steps. And I love that we have 5 weeks. We can play with it. I'd like to, there was one question I wanted to ask everybody, and that was, I guess first we'll define who we want to target, but what are the 5 most important things that we want to cover in those 5 weeks? Like does each one build on the other, or are they each separate?
Yeah.
Like maybe, 5 separate things, or do we start with 1 week and then it builds on each week? That's pulling in people. Like if I were to teach something with NVC, first I'd have to explain what are feelings and needs. And then, Marshall has a needs and feeling list, so that because how he defines feelings is different than, someone else might define it. So that we all have to get on the same page if we're going to be learning NVC as a tool. What does that mean? And then building on that up to, taking responsibility, following his book. So.
Good. Okay, so I wrote down here, so Facing History and Ourselves is another curriculum model that I love. I don't know if you're familiar with that organization. No.
Wait, what's it called? I don't have any more room on my paper, but what's it called?
Facing History and Ourselves.
Facing History and Ourselves, okay.
Margot Stern-Strom. I actually am an award-winning Margot Stern-Strom recipient. I got a teaching award for my work in video. We were recording the stories of second-generation Holocaust survivors.
Oh.
Facing History and Ourselves. Margot was a child in Memphis during the Civil Rights Movement, and she made connections from the Civil Rights Movement to her own Jewish upbringing and the Holocaust. And so her whole model is facing history and seeing what happened in history and connecting it to ourselves. So this whole like holistic connection model is like my jam. But the big thing that Facing History always like ends a workshop or whatever with is, what was your main takeaway from that video? So I think keeping in mind, what are the 5 takeaways? What are the 5 key things? If we could tell these people nothing else, or if we could teach them 5 skills that will help them like triage, right? Maybe that's where we need to focus for this and just see how a simple structure could work. Just a thought.
Right. Or just, what's 5 things, and then we delve into that. If we keep going, the next time we go deeper, and then we go deeper, and then we go deeper. So it's because what are the 5 things we want to touch on now in this short period of time. And I like how people can maybe support each other in between. Maybe we could go into dyads, maybe we could create, depending on who comes, who's their partner. So then maybe you're more engaged. If you're partnered with Susie, maybe you want to show up the following week because, you know, now you have accountability with Susie. And maybe what we used to do when I was first starting to study NVC is that we would break in and then we would talk with somebody, you know, once or twice a week and just hold space for them as they said what they were feeling and what they were needing. And everybody was trying to play around with, is that a feeling or not?
Right.
But it engaged us together so that we were more invested than in what we were learning. And so maybe they could practice, you know, a pose that you do or something else in between if we have enough people to break out.
Even a texting check-in just to say, hey, have you been checking in with your body this week, you know, or whatever. But yeah, we do have to go, but
well, we'll talk more. There's lots of talking to do, but we launched this thing Thursday for right now. We lost so we have to talk beforehand because we have a lot of work to do.
No, it's next Thursday. It's next Thursday.
It's not this coming Thursday.
Nope, we got a whole week off.
Well, we still have a lot to do. I've been having dreams about it.
No, this is really, really great. So thank you. We'll touch base, and you're a rock star. I'll send you this chat.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.